I'm Kathy, and I am a collection management librarian at the library. And I guess I should tell you what I like to read. So if you missed us last time, I am a big memoir reader and also quite a true crime reader as well, but a bit of fiction in there too.
Hi, I'm Rose. I am a digital learning librarian at the library in adult services. And while I teach and do a lot with digital learning, my true love is reading. And I read a lot. I usually read 3 things at a time: a physical book, a digital book, and an audiobook. Sometimes 4 if I'm feeling crazy. And I read almost everything that is in the fiction world. I will only read nonfiction if it's like essays or if my book club's reading it. I'm pretty heavy into literary fiction, but I'll read genres like mystery and romance, science fiction, a lot of YA here and there. So just a lot of fiction.
I'm Margita. I'm a reader services librarian in adult services. And I also read a little bit of everything. I tend to read literary fiction. I'll do other genres. I'll do contemporary romance. But I also am an avid watcher. So I'm a person who has watched a lot of TV shows. And so if you want to talk TV, I'm your lady.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dontaná. I am a collection management librarian at the library. And so last time I said that I would read anything as long as there is an LGBTQ character in it, which is still true. But I also read a lot of graphic novels. They're just so visual and a lot of fun and easy to get lost in.
Thanks, everyone. And my name is Alexandra Skinner, and I'm the manager of adult services at Oak Park Public Library. I just launched a poll that we're going to talk about later, so feel free to answer that. And as we get started, I'm going to ask our great librarians, what was the last thing that you read?
Okay, so I'm going to start. And the last thing, it might not be the actual last thing I read, but the last thing I read that I really enjoyed was Translations by Sopan Deb. If you know Sopan Deb, you might, because he also writes for the New York Times. He's their culture critic. He is also a basketball reporter, and he's also a stand-up comedian. I was not familiar with him, and you certainly don't need to be to read the book. So it's basically a memoir. And he had kind of a rough childhood, but not in any big, major, booming way, in a very quiet, sort of, maybe there were mental health issues in his family way. And by the time he's 30, he's just drifted apart from his parents. Again, there's no big reason. It was just kind of a slow drift away from his parents. He hardly ever talks to them, and they just kind of become like a tired trope in his stand-up routine. So his dad even moves to India without telling anyone after his parents get divorced. So he gets invited to a wedding in India, and he feels like it's the perfect reason to reconnect with his father. And shortly after that is Mother's Day, and that's the reason he decides to reconnect with his mother. But he takes sort of this investigative journalist approach of almost interviewing them to find out about them. Like, he doesn't even know anything about his parents. He hardly knows, like, if they have siblings and how many siblings. So it's him learning about his parents, reconnecting with them, or maybe connecting for the first time, to be totally honest. And the reason I loved it so much was because he's a stand-up comedian, and it's really funny, even though it deals with a lot of these bigger issues. And he is so charming and so earnest, and never like foists his responsibility for what happened onto anyone else. He doesn't blame anyone for what happened. He takes responsibility where he should. But again, just he's earnest. That's the best word. And charming. And like I said, very witty. There's so many funny episodes in it. I feel like it's a perfect book for right now because it is light and easy reading. It's pretty short. But yet it still grapples with some bigger issues. So again, that was Missed Translations by Sopan Deb, D-E-B as in boy.
Kathy, when you said that title, it made me think of this morning when I helped a patron access their Libby accounts and the book that they wanted to check out. And I was like, why does that book sound so familiar? I just helped someone check that out this morning. So
that's awesome.
People are looking for this book. So yeah. Something that I recently read, and I actually listened to this, but it's available as a book on Libby and on Hoopla, and as an audiobook on both platforms, is called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which is a mystery. And I really enjoyed it on audio, but I could see the benefits of reading it because it's very twisty. And I found myself at moments wanting to go back and be like, wait, who was that character? So the plot is that this guy, his name is Aiden, wakes up in this like big country Downton Abbey style manor, and he doesn't really know who he is or what he's doing there. And he has to like figure it all out. And over the course of this day, he realizes that he's in some sort of like mystery, or I kind of think of it as clue, because he's living out this day and he's trying to figure out who's going to murder Evelyn Hardcastle at the end of the day. So throughout the course of the day, he makes contact with a character who, let's just call him Death, who explains that you are stuck in this house and the only way to escape is to figure out who murdered Evelyn Hardcastle, and you have 8 chances to do it, because every day or every time you get killed, you're going to wake up at the start of the day in a new person in the house's body. So this main character, Aiden, embodies different people throughout the book. And so you have to like really pay attention to like, okay, now he's this person. What was that person doing before? So there's a lot of like structure built into this novel, this mystery. I really liked it because it, even though there's a lot, it was light, so something that you can handle right now. But it also really held my interest. It takes place in England in this manor house, so it feels very like, I don't know, fancy. And and you're constantly trying to guess like who's going to kill Evelyn Hardcastle and who can you trust, and like whenever he's a new character, you find out more and more about the day and how every character's actions affect the next thing that's going to happen. So again, on audio, it was really great, but I found myself at times thinking like, oh, I wish I had the book so that I could like go back and double check something. So either platform would be great. So again, that's The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, available on Libby and on Hoopla.
So I'm going to talk about an audiobook. I still continue to have a trouble with reading ebooks or print books, and so I've gone towards audiobooks. And so I'm going to talk about Dear Girls, which is by Ali Wong. Ali Wong, if you don't know, is a comedian. She has like 2 Netflix comedy specials. She has that movie Always Be My Maybe, which has the adored, infamous Keanu Reeves cameo you might have seen gifs of. And so she wrote Dear Girls for her 2 younger daughters. And so during this time, I love a good memoir. It's for her. I love hearing her read it. She does talk about being a woman in comedy, being Asian, dealing with discrimination. But she also talks about lots of jokes. She talks about food after my own heart. I still am cooking a lot. And so I also want to mention the title Roughage by Abra Behrens. I saw her book in print before, but now I got it through Hoopla. I have it on my iPad right now. I'm actually going to make her anchovy butter, compound butter over asparagus tonight and try it out. But I think it's really good for right now, because as we get towards summer, one day, more vegetables are coming in, and she really breaks it out by vegetable. She has a chapter on each one with beautiful photos.
Okay, well, that sounds really fancy and nowhere near what I will be cooking tonight. I'm eating leftovers. But the last thing I read was, so it's called Shadows and Dreams, and it is by Alexis Hall. And it's on Libby as an ebook. but it was originally published back in the early 2000s and then was republished recently. So it has an old school-ish kind of vibe. But it's set in England in, again, early 2000s, and it's about a half fairy princess private investigator who is dating a vampire, and someone she tried to hook up with has asked her to find her brother. But you add to that, there's a vampire council that's in town to put our private investigator main character under trial for things that happened in a previous book. And then there's some guy who wants to become a god. So if that sounds all over the place, it's because this novel is all over the place. It was really light reading. It was very, I was able to read it all the way through, which has been hard lately because I haven't finished a lot of things. But otherwise, it was really nice. So again, that's Shadows and Dreams by Alexis Hall.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to end our poll. Thanks, everyone, for participating. We got 100% participation, and 62% of us are reading more, 15% of us are watching more, and 23% of us are listening more. So definitely a lot more reading happening.
So I'm really impressed with that because we've talked about it both this time and last time that we ourselves are having some difficulty with reading right now. And as I look at what you attendees are reading, I'm even more impressed. Like, it's all these really heavy, and like the overstory is like 600 pages or something. I'm obsessed with that. And I honestly can't believe it. I'm not sure why my attention is so bad right now, but it is. So I just wanted to give kudos to all of you for all your heavy reading during this time. I will say I have noticed lots of demand for plague books right now. So I guess there's a lot of people who really want to dig into this time in history. So
I'm pretty sure that the most watched things right now, also on streaming services, are all Contagion. And other films. I just want to let everyone know, to remind you that if you haven't participated in the chat feature is right at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can log on there and just make sure to change your typed messages to panelists and attendees, and then we'll share what we're reading. So librarians, what is one of your go-to book recommendations? Kathy, if you could start us off. What's a book that when someone comes in and says, I just need something to read, what's your sure bet?
Yeah. So this is always a good thing to have in your back pocket, I feel like, as a librarian, because you often get people who maybe don't really know exactly what they're looking for at that moment. And there's kind of like a handful of books that I always consider like crowd pleasers. That most everyone who you put it in their hand, they're going to like it. I mean, fingers crossed to some extent. But the book that I find myself going to again and again is The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, who, if you've heard her name, she has a pretty popular book in the recent past few months, which is The Memory Police, which is very, very different than The Housekeeper and the Professor. And I will also warn you, she has another one that was right after this one called Hotel Iris, maybe, that is also totally different. So just a word of warning about her as an author. She might not be, you don't want to pick up anything by her. Make sure you read the story. So The Housekeeper and the Professor is this amazing, beautiful story about a math professor who's been in a serious accident and he has no short-term memory anymore. And the housekeeper and her young son who come to help him out every day. So when they show up, they have to introduce themselves to him every time and kind of start from scratch every day. And the way they form relationships with each other is over math and baseball, two things that he can't forget because it's something he knew that's hardwired into him from so long ago, and also because there's rules to both of those things. So and that's all it is. It's just this slim little story about the relationship amongst these three people, and it's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's heartwarming. It's lovely. And you really don't have to know anything about math or baseball or care about either of those things to be into it. There is all kinds of like heavy duty math stuff that comes up, but you can pretty much just skim over it and be fine, because when it comes down to it, it's a book about these three characters. And again, to me, this is another great book for during this time if you're not reading like the Overstory and Valentine, where it's just heartwarming and touching, and I think it's 200 pages maybe. It's a slim, beautiful little thing.
Thanks, Kathy. That sounds nice.
Will you remind us of what the title of that was again?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. It's called The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, Rose. Go ahead.
All good. So I always find this such a tricky question, because when people come in to ask me this, one, I love it, but then I always ask them, like, well, what do you like to read? Because I have so many go-tos, but it depends on, like, you know, who the person is. Like, is it a teenager? Is it like, you know, a 30-something-year-old new mom who is very rushed for time? So all those things I take into factor. But so I wrote down this huge list because there's so many that I could talk about. Like The Dutch House, which is just so beautiful, and I think is my favorite thing I read last year, but it has a wait list of like 1 million years. And I also really love I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. It's a teen book. It follows the timeline of two, brother and sister, but the timelines switch, and it's just like, it's so beautiful. And it's not about an apocalypse, which is like what all teen books are about. So that was really refreshing. But I guess what I'll talk about today is like my standard book that I can return to all the time. It's the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. You probably know Barbara Kingsolver. She's pretty famous. But the Poisonwood Bible, it just always moves me every time I read it. And I find that when you revisit books, the way that they affect you change over time, just based on like what you're going through and where you are in your life. And so I've read the Poisonwood Bible at least 3 times. And it takes place in the 1960s in the Congo. And if you're familiar with African history, a lot of African countries decolonized within the 1960s, early 1960s. And so this missionary family moves to the Congo in 1960, right before they have this revolution. And it's this reverend, his wife, and their 4 daughters. And all of the chapters alternate between the perspectives of the women in the book. So the mom and then the daughters. You don't get the perspective of the husband, but you get this idea that he's very zealous, but also very naive in what he's going into. And it's all about the relationships that the daughters make within the community and themselves, and over time, like how they adapt to living in the Congo through this revolution. And I just think it's like, it's uplifting, but also really tragic. So, and it's also beautifully written and spans a lot of time, which I really enjoy, where like books take time to build and then take you into the future a little bit. So it gives you more of a sense of completion. So that's the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver.
Rose, I like those points because same, I don't know. I think it depends on the person. There's so many choices. I'll mention a few titles I love. I love The Shadow of the Wind. I get the name wrong. I think it's Carlos Ruiz Zafran, but I could have that wrong. It's a great book for book lovers, and it's so beautifully written. For audio, I tend to do celebrity memoirs, but I do love Ready Player One. I didn't necessarily love the movie, but I find the audio, it's read by Will Wheaton, and I love his direction with it. It's fast paced, it's got pop culture references, and so for me, it's like perfect. And I've loved Devil in the White City. I got it years ago as a gift, and I still love it. I'm still praying that they make it into a movie. It's been years in the making. One day.
One day, we can hope, right? So my go-to isn't necessarily one book, it's one author. So my author is Jacqueline Carey. And the reason why I pick her is because all of her books are all over the place, but she writes in a series. So there's one series called, the series is called Kushao's Legacy, but the first book is called Kushao's Dart. It's high fantasy in that it's an alternate universe of like ancient Britain, but with kings and queens, and there's magic, and there's this person who lives in like this tower in the middle of the ocean, and going to that tower is the only way to get across the ocean to visit other places. Let's see, so that's one series. She has another series called Agent of Hell, which is a contemporary fantasy set in Minnesota, I believe, where there's this woman who is part of a travel agency, but not really, and she serves Hell, the goddess of death. So that's the Agent of Hell series, and the first book in that one is Dark Currents, I believe. There is a third series called the Santa Olivia duology, and Santa Olivia, the first book in that series, is in the future, after a pandemic has closed the border of Texas. Texas no longer exists as part of the United States. It's just its own thing now. And there are genetically modified humans, and they grow up and they're like really thick, beefy people. But it follows this one girl whose name is Lou, Loup, because she's like a little wolf, and she becomes this really great boxer. Let's see, that's 3 series. She also has a Miranda and Caliban, which is a retelling of, I think it's The Tempest. I'm not good at Shakespeare. And she also did one called The Starless Sea, which is another epic fantasy, but it's only 1 book this time, which is just really amazing. She has such great character development that I think it doesn't matter that these are like fantastic retellings or fantastic creations from her mind. Like, I think that there's something for everybody in all of her series, whether that's court intrigue or fast-paced contemporary feelings and emotions and characters. I really think that's why she's my go-to for everything.
I love the title, Agent of Hell. Or Agent.
Yeah.
And also that it takes place in Minnesota. Right? Yeah.
It's like a little resort town in Minnesota. I'm like, okay, Minnesota's great.
So we only have a few more minutes left. We have a little over 5 minutes. So I'm going to ask in the chat for everyone about, we're going to move off of books a little bit for those last 5 minutes and just ask a general kind of like, what have you been watching or listening? So I'll ask that in the chat too, so make sure to let us know. And I'm just going to remind everyone too, we're going to send out an email after this with all of these books and titles in it, so you can, I've been taking furious notes so that you don't have to. So what has everyone been watching or listening?
So I'm really happy that you asked this question because Canopy, I finally just watched. It was recommended to me a while ago by another librarian, shock, called Hearts Beat Loud. It's a movie with Nick Offerman, and Toni Collette is in it. And I did not know who the daughter was, but she's the best part of the movie. She's amazing. But again, this is one of these things to me that was perfect right now, where it's just beautiful and heartwarming and charming and cute and funny. It's basically about a dad in Brooklyn and his daughter who's about to leave for college, and he owns a record store. And he's about to have to close this record store. And he has, as his daughter says, "You've been wanting to start a band with me since I was 12. And that's exactly what it is. It's his want to start a band with his daughter. And especially as she's just about to go away to college, he's really feeling that hard. But it's just totally charming. It's a little slice of life comedy drama that I totally loved, and the fact that it's on Canopy makes it even better. So that was Hearts Beat Loud. It's super, super wonderful. I recommended it to my parents also, and they also loved it. So I felt like that's a good sign.
That sounds really good. I'm going to check that out on Canopy. So I have been like ravenously listening to Fiona Apple's new album. It's called Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Fiona Apple is like, I don't know, most important person besides Beyonce to my music life. And she releases an album like never. And so she just released this album called Fetch the Bolt Cutters. It is fantastic. Pitchfork gave it like 10 stars, which they never do, like a perfect score. So I don't know if that one's on Hoopla, unfortunately. I doubt it is. But I'm listening to it on Apple Music. And what I'm watching is super dorky. I'm watching all the free theater things on YouTube. So the things I've been watching is I've just watched the Stephen Sondheim 90th birthday celebration where all of these Broadway actors come and like sing songs to Stephen Sondheim. It's great. Every week, National Theatre from London releases a new play on Thursday, which is available for a whole week. And so I think, so today's Wednesday, so till tomorrow, it's 12th night. And then tomorrow it is Frankenstein, which stars Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, which is exciting. And so I've been watching those plays every week. And then Andrew Lloyd Webber has a YouTube channel, and he releases it on Friday and it's through Sunday. So it's just the weekend, but it's one of his musicals that's available to stream. And I honestly don't know what it is this weekend. It might be the Love Never Dies, but that might have been last weekend. I can't, all the days are running in together for me. So I know I watched Phantom and that Love Never Dies is after that, but I can't remember if that just happened or if it's going to happen. So I'm watching all those free theater things on YouTube.
For me, I'm doing, on one hand, I'm watching like old comforting shows. So I'm watching like Amazing Race, which is not new to, I'm sure, anyone. I'm watching RuPaul Drag Race. Then I'm rewatching The Office because I love it. But for new shows, I finally this week have been able to get into them again. And so I just started watching Mrs. America, which has like 1,000 actresses, but Kate Blanchett, who I love and who's great in it. And I'm going to start watching Normal People because I saw Hulu finally put it out, and I read that book, and I love that book.
So mine is a little weird because I've been watching Wicked Tuna Outer Banks, which is about commercial tuna fishing in the Outer Banks. Why am I watching tuna fishing? I don't know, but it is so engrossing, and Captain Dave Marciano is my favorite fisherman, which I never thought was a thing that I would say. But yeah, so it's been me and National Geographic.
Watch others catch when I
That is great. I just wrote down Outer Banks on my notes. Outer Banks tuna fishing. Fishing? Is that the full title?
Wicked Tuna Outer Banks.
Okay, make sure I get it right. Thank you. And if you, thank you all. Those were, I found myself during all of that being like, yes, on my list. Haven't gotten to it yet, but yes. So thank you so much. And also saying that while reading all of your great comments in our chat. So it's just about 4 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for this half hour of basically water cooler librarian talk. What we're reading, what we're watching, what we're listening to. And it's really great. We hope to see you back here again. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.